And now we are continuing with the patient advocacy session and with our next speaker, who is Ella Balassa. Ella is a patient advocate, consultant, and a person living with cystic fibrosis. Having a biology background, she is an advocate for the development of novel therapies for treatment of antibiotic-resistant infections, including phage therapy, as well as speaking publicly at conferences, meetings, and to companies about the value of patient voice in research. Ella, welcome to Biotech Atelier, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Jordana. I'm not able to share my screen. Oh, okay. I just saw it pop up. Thank you. Okay. One moment. And you all are able to see that?
Perfect full screen presentation.
All right, thank you. It really is a pleasure to be here today sharing my perspectives as a patient with cystic fibrosis and someone who has over the years become an advocate for myself, the cystic fibrosis community here in the United States, and more broadly as a representative of patient communities who need support and collaboration from all healthcare stakeholders. So my presentation today is going to be about my health journey, my background, and how it has facilitated my participation and now my more professional roles as an advocate. I'll first share about my background and my health condition and how my professional life has intertwined with my health. And then this transformation into the advocacy passion that I have now. And then I will also highlight an experience that I received with an experimental therapy called phage therapy that I sought out and coordinated for the treatment directly with researchers. And this really opened my eyes to the value that my own involvement in care has resulted in. And in this instance, it was the possibility to try a novel therapy. And then I'm also going to touch on a few themes surrounding patient involvement in healthcare, and first discussing the value of the experience of patients and what a critical component in healthcare that it is. As individuals, living with a particular condition, we have the greatest understanding of how our bodies work and what our daily challenges look like. And we can take this knowledge and provide guidance to healthcare stakeholders to guide research priorities and providing valuable feedback in study designs and product development. So, and then the last thing I'll discuss is, what it means to be patient-centric and the actions that need to be taken on the part of industry and biotech and other healthcare organizations for better patient involvement and collaboration in research and the clinical settings as well. So I'll start with my journey to becoming an advocate. So I was born with cystic fibrosis, and I was diagnosed at 1 year old. Briefly, for those that are unaware, cystic fibrosis is a lung disease, and it's characterized by the buildup of thick mucus in the lungs, and this causes a cycle of inflammation and infection, and then requires lifelong treatment with antibiotics. So over time, these infections have deteriorated my lung tissue, and it leads to a shortened life expectancy due to lung failure. So over the course of my life, I have had countless hospitalizations. I've required intravenous antibiotics, and I daily require doing 4 inhaled breathing treatments a day to clear this mucus from my lungs. And that photo on the right, you can see me doing one of these treatments that I do daily. And I've always had an interest in science, but I never wanted to study medicine in school because of the many scary encounters that I've had with doctors as a child in the hospital setting. But nonetheless, I did receive a degree in biology, and then I worked in a environmental microbiology lab for a number of years. So the research that I conducted in that lab began to intersect with my disease, and I worked on a project involving antibiotic-resistant bacteria in river water. And these are the same bacteria that I was examining also thrive in the lungs of people with cystic fibrosis. So this connection and then the work that I was doing as a researcher and educating the public about environmental issues, I realized that I could contribute so much to the value and collaboration within healthcare in the healthcare community, about ways that I could help to educate patients on their disease and then their conditions, and then how that would help to facilitate research advancement together. So I pursued opportunities to serve on a number of research committees with the CF Foundation, and I was part of the I still am part of the Infection Research Steering Committee, where we decide on infection research priorities. I also review clinical trial protocols to determine the feasibility for patients. And I've also since participated in a number of speaking engagements to bring awareness to patient needs and the topics of antimicrobial resistance at the Milken Institute, the FDA, and just a number of other conferences. And I now am a patient engagement consultant working within the pharmaceutical space and with healthcare companies in strategizing ways to incorporate patient perspectives into their research and their products. Excuse me. So in summary, having this science background has provided me a greater understanding of healthcare as well as the confidence and the motivation to leverage my voice and pursue these kinds of opportunities for involvement. And then it also allowed me to pursue this treatment that I'm going to talk about next. So I found out about phage therapy accidentally through watching a documentary online about another CF patient that was being treated. And I contacted researchers directly, and they were receptive to treating me. But my CF physician was not supportive of my decision to try an alternative to antibiotics, which really have over the last couple of years lost their effectiveness due to the antibiotic resistance in my lungs. And so I was already running out of options to treat my infections. So I navigated this treatment myself, and taking this initiative made me realize that if I wasn't equipped with the understanding and the prior experience communicating with researchers, I wouldn't have pursued this kind of treatment. I couldn't have. And my life could be very different now if I hadn't taken these steps in how I knew how to utilize my experience and my communications with researchers. So my point being is that we can't expect patients to jump into these kind of roles as patient leaders and advocates for themselves without providing them an understanding of their importance and their value in their own health management, and giving them the proper education and resources to be able to take those steps, and then also to help in shaping research practices outside of their own care. And I was a decision maker in my care, but overall, I would say that health literacy is lacking, and patients aren't receiving these kinds of resources to take on those roles. So with that being said, it starts with patients being supported and encouraged from their doctors, from the healthcare, from the pharmaceutical industry, and advocacy organizations as well, to provide them knowledge about their disease and then encourage them to share these experiences and making these decisions together with their doctors or with their health professionals. And This improves disease outcomes, improves adherence to treatments, and just increases understanding. And when companies and organizations encourage patients and they're listening to patients, they are then motivating these patients to gain knowledge and then become more important players in their care. And then in addition, we as patients have to recognize that we are the experts in our care. And once someone begins to take these active roles, they become more invested in learning and trying to solve the problems on behalf of their disease community. And this is how strong patient leaders and patient advocates are created. So what makes a strong advocate? As far as advocating for our own health and our condition, self-advocating does require us to step out of our comfort zone and be assertive about our opinions and know our value that lies in this lived experience, and have that be our fuel and motivation to pursue opportunities to share our voice. And then when it comes to advocating for a broader patient community, a strong advocate is someone who is positioned as an expert in their lived experience and beyond it. And they understand many facets of the healthcare industry and should be a catalyst for change and a decision maker in healthcare. And they should be able to direct the scope of research and healthcare practices. And they can also provide solutions and strategies to healthcare companies so that the company can then turn those ideas into tangible improvements in their products and their service. But often this lived experience expertise isn't weighed equally in the healthcare industry as professional healthcare experience is. And even strong advocates are viewed as just the receivers of services and care. And when asked for feedback to enhance healthcare, they're often in minimal roles or with limited scope and in volunteer and, and unpaid roles. So the healthcare industry has to recognize the value of this mutually beneficial relationship of incorporating patient voice from the inception and the design of research all the way through drug development. And this is critical for cultivating collaboration and then patient trust. And these are some of the pillars of valuable patient relationships that I'm going to talk about now. So I think the most important thing to remember is to lead with empathy. And that should be the forefront or should be the focus at any, when it comes to any patient interaction. So whether that is the doctor communicating with his patient, empathy makes that doctor slow down and take the time to explain a new procedure or medication to a patient. When it comes into the pharmaceutical setting, empathy drives a patient engagement team to maintain the communication and the relationship with patients even after a clinical trial has been completed or a focus group has commenced where some of this feedback is gathered from patients, and that they maintain those relationships because they want to know about the health and just the overall well-being and wellness of patients. And so this goes along with treating patients as more than just a consumer, which builds the foundation of trust in these relationships. And building trust comes from the foundation of transparency in the procedures and the clinical trial processes, informed consent process, and also in mitigating fear of unknown and unanswered questions on behalf of the patient. And it requires a genuine compassion, as I said, for the overall well-being of patients' lives. And this means that there has to be a genuine desire to understand patient barriers, burdens, knowledge gaps, needs, And this can be understood and gathered from listening to patients. And in turn, patients reveal their needs and their obstacles that can be surmounted together. So building trust and credibility between industry and patient populations to gain the patient interest and participation requires pharma to give back to patients in more ways than just delivering a product or a drug that improves their health. Patients need support in their healthcare journeys. And this can be through patient access programs, through, for example, grants for scholarships to advance education for patients. And then in organizing support groups, chat lines, this all conveys a message that pharma and the industry does have the patient's best interest in mind, and they're supporting all aspects of life. And that it isn't about necessarily just the profit to be gained from a person's unfortunate circumstance of having a condition and requiring the drug or the product that they're using, but that they're being supported throughout their lives. And some other important ways that this support can build trust and education are by providing patient resources. So to improve communication between the healthcare industry and patients, as I said, health literacy has to be improved as a whole. So this can be done from creating simple but informative patient-facing education materials, reaching out to patient populations through social media and through advocacy organizations whom they trust already and have a good relationship with. And then this can really build that foundation for a trusting interaction and relationship. So how can we shift to more meaningful collaboration between patients and the industry? It is vital to develop products and solutions together. And this co-creation is working patients and in industry to identify the problem, how to solve it, and then constantly be modifying this process as needed. So it really should be the idea of for patients with patients. So asking what patients need most and then providing that. And it is also a back and forth. Industry needs the assurance that their product or their service and the fruits of their labor will result in greater uptake with patient groups, or at least an increase in this trust and the connection of their targeted population, and then vice versa. So patients have to feel as though their participation in clinical trial feedback or in marketing and product development will be applied to meaningfully create change that benefits that population, the patient population. And this change then should be relayed back to patients for patients to see their value tangibly and what their contribution has created to improve quality of life and services and products for those like them. And this also helps to build that trust and the foundational relationship. So including the patient voice directly builds this mutually beneficial relationship. This dynamic is helping humanity because patients are getting treatment and support for living the healthiest and most fulfilled lives that they can. And a pharma company is able to thrive with the help of patients' loyalty and advice in various development strategies. So maintaining these relationships through this feedback loop of disseminating trial results and co-creating and designing, and it really strengthens the future of research as well. So I guess to summarize, I'd say that overall patient communities want to be involved. They are eager to understand more, to advance their knowledge about treatments available, to improve their own health and outcomes. But there has to be support, guidance, and a genuine interest for this kind of mutual collaboration as well. And I would say that I think the industry is headed towards more patient-centric approaches, and many companies do have advocacy teams and engagement teams, but they must be truly eager to use this engagement that they receive to elicit meaningful change in their strategy or just in their plans. So it's not just checking off a box and moving along. It has to be a genuine desire to create the best product for patient quality of life. And that is really number one. Building that strong, trusting relationship between industry and patients is the fundamental to future valuable interactions and collaborations. And listening to the patients and encouraging them is how it begins. So thank you for having me, and thanks for joining and listening in. I think I'm open to any questions, and there's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out with any follow-up or connections if needed. So thank you. I think
Thank you, Ella.
Stop
Fantastic talk as usual, and your story is inspiration. Yes, being a research either, I do believe that research background really helps in patient advocacy. But what about the other people and patient advocate? Are we able to make them more influent, efficient, empowered by, I don't know, probably educating them and transferring our knowledge to some extent to them?
Yes, I think that patients like me have so much leverage that I can share. You know, I think that it's something that is a passion of mine to use my voice to empower other patients who, you know, might not have that background or that understanding, or, you know, the self-awareness or the confidence to pursue these avenues. But I think it's patients like me and others and other advocacy organizations really that can help uplift patients and encourage them in these ways. And then also, like I said, obviously, you know, industry and the biotechs doing their part in what they can to building this trust. That is another way that patients are going to feel comfortable and encouraged to take on these kind of roles and to have this more self empowerment.
Thank you. Yes, we've mentioned only the advantages of being a researcher and having this scientific background and being a patient advocate. Are there any disadvantages?
I'd say that maybe some disadvantages that I'm expected to know how to navigate a lot of things that maybe I also don't quite have experience with. But I think when we think, or when a lot of people think, oh, okay, you're a patient and a researcher and you know everything, and you must understand all aspects so you can fully advocate for yourself and your community in all ways. And that's not the case. Not everybody doesn't know everything. And I am also still learning many things, both about research, about advocacy, about the healthcare industry as a whole. So I think even I need support and education and continued, I guess, compassion too in what I know and what I can provide.
Totally agree. Yeah, sometimes knowledge is not an advantage. I mean, sometimes when you're digging too deep in something, it gets too scary. So probably a healthy curiosity is a good thing.
That's right.
In patient advocacy, and I can see that Beatrice is with a hand raised. Beatrice, may I unmute you and give you the word to ask your question? Yeah, now
Yes.
you should be able to speak.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to say a big thank you to Ella. You've gone to a very far end as to what a patient can do. And I think a lot of patients need such inspiration. But I want to touch on stigmatization, stigma surrounding a lot of diseases. And if you come to my area, there's a lot of stigma surrounding even breast cancer. So we need to find ways to empower these women to be able to come out and even share their experiences and get the strength to fight for others as well, because what you are doing is not for you personally, but to encourage newly diagnosed people and to help in educating them. What do you think patients in Ghana, for example, can do with in the circumstances they find themselves, even sometimes to be able to go through the treatment and to come out successful, to be able to stand out? It's very challenging. And what would you advise that such patients do?
Yes, that is an incredibly complicated situation, as there is a lot of course, social stigma and other related, healthcare hurdles there to overcome. But I guess I'm of course not an expert at all here, but I would suggest that in those communities, I would think that word of mouth is very valuable for women to share their experiences with others. And in some of those, clinic settings or, smaller communities where, they're one woman's unfortunate circumstance can be used as inspiration for others, to give hope and to share their story. So if there are ways that their experience can be disseminated to the newly diagnosed, even in small group, or even in just across a few people at a time, it makes a difference in another person's life. So I'm not sure of how that can be done, but I would just think that the human connection and the interpersonal connections is what people remember. And when we share our stories and people hear us, that's when we remember that. So any newly diagnosed patients would really stand out to them to be able to have a connection and have this sort of intimate, exchange of experiences when it comes to, dealing with difficult cancer and breast cancer and like that.
Thank you so much. And now I hope I can link you up with some of our patients for them to get the inspiration from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I would love to.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice, for including in the discussion. And Gada, you were raising hand, or would you like to say or ask something? Yes. Here you are.
I had some. Oh, sorry. Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Sorry, Gargana.
Can see and hear. Yes, I saw your hand raised. So
yes, I'll get that question. Of course, incredibly inspirational. It's a wonderful talk. Really, that's all I can say. Very inspirational. I just wanted to touch upon this because actually quite new to me. I don't know how it skipped me to actually ask this return on investment type mindset, to actually see and measure how the contribution was applied when you do that, when you've done something, you want to see the somehow how it was applied. So can you give me just an example? Have you seen that in projects that you've been included in and undertaken with pharma or with other stakeholders? How have you followed up with your contribution?
Yeah, so I've been on both sides of this. I've been in, clinical trials where my feedback was asked for afterward as far as how the process went and, what my opinions were. But then none of that was relayed back to me as far as like, what changes my input made. And that made me feel disconnected from the process. It made me not really feel like I was really, that my insights were valuable and that it really made a difference or that it was even really regarded. But on the other hand, I have worked with a company recently who, whenever I'm on a board with other patient advocates and our feedback and input is then brought back to us in meetings and really tangibly shown, what impact it has made on their product and their service and how that is now helping to change future. For example, one thing was looking at they were developing an index for measuring patient burden and how our input on this index helped them to change the criterias and some of the parameters that they were looking at and change the value that was given to a certain experience and what burden level that was. And I think that it is very important for that loop where it really brings the relationship whole, where it is really that back and forth. So, the industry is receiving this from us and we're providing it, and now they're giving it back. They're saying this is why you're important and what your contribution has meant. And I think that just strengthens our relationship.
It's an excellent point, and I'm wondering whether other members of the panel can maybe, I just think it's something I never really thought about deeply. Should we put into place a mechanism where we are, ask or demand that we get an answer back in some way or form, or do you not think that that's something to do, or we just wait and see whether we did contribute or not? I mean, it's an investment on a patient's part to have given this, so it's only reciprocally. It should be reciprocally at least respected that an answer be given back or taken into account. I just don't know whether we actually do that in our contexts. I'm wondering whether someone else has an opinion about that, or. Peter, would you have an opinion? Would you help me out with that one? Because the U.S. context might be different than the Europe context. I'm wondering whether we actually do like to see the contribution taken into account.
Peter, you're muted.
It's the right issue, but if you explain a little bit more, I can give you an answer. But you can also skip my opinion.
Probably it's something, totally new. So we should start thinking about that Ella covered in her talk.
There's a lack. Thank you. Thanks, Ella.
Thank you.